Please welcome back to the stage, Peter Sheahan.
Just you guys clapping is great. Hi guys. Do you want to maybe move forward and let's fill this? It's obviously a pretty quiet room. Why don't we fill this front block here and make our panelists feel like we got some love? Thank you. You all look like you've been in Vegas for 2 days. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like front row. You know what? It's just you and me and the panel. That's it, right? I think we have a voice of God to intro our two panelists as well. We've got a properly good two panelists today. I'm excited about it. Yeah, get that, brother. All right, looks pretty good. So I'm actually going to start by having Kevin and Jenelle just introduce themselves a little bit. I think we're really privileged to have two very senior executives or former senior executives of large manufacturers, not just with a footprint here in the US, but in fact internationally. And obviously the majority of your career, Kevin, was at Toyota. Do you want to maybe just give us 30 seconds on your background? I know everyone's probably read your bio at this point, which is why they're here, but it'd be good to get 30 seconds.
Thank you for having me here. And yeah, I spent 34 years at Toyota. Actually ran stamping, body, weld, and paint operations for a number of years there. But most of my career there was in the environmental sustainability space, acting as the Chief Sustainability Officer for Toyota North America.
Yeah, nice. And Jenelle, obviously Trane is deeply committed, not just to their manufacturing base here, but in the area of sustainability as well. Do you want to maybe just give us 30 seconds?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, or almost afternoon, everybody. My name is Jenelle Shapiro. So I lead Circularity for Trane Technologies. If you aren't familiar with our business, Toyota is a very known brand name. We manufacture heating and cooling systems for buildings, any type of size, down to your home, up to data center size capacity. And then we also do refrigeration systems for on-site or on-road transportation. So that's what Trane Technologies does.
I think Trane might be one of the biggest companies not everyone's heard of.
Yes.
I mean, you guys are huge. You also make golf carts, right?
That was one of our brands at some point, yes, correct.
Yeah, exactly. So I promised these two, my first questions would be, what's changing in manufacturing? But we had a conversation on the panel yesterday about Formula One and the hybrid drivetrains that are obviously dominating the sport. And having worked a lot with Toyota, I was pretty fascinated by how strong a line Toyota held around the hybrid platform rather than going all EV. And it seems like in the last 24 months, the world has proven you right. Does that sound about right?
That sounds perfect, actually. I could talk to you for days about electric vehicles and the pros and cons and a lot of the craziness that went on. But yes, it makes so much more sense at this point in time until we get infrastructure built to have a hybrid system. And actually right now I'm driving a hybrid Tundra truck, which is,
And raising Scottish Highland cattle in your truck. Well, not in your truck, using the truck.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's that technology is and Toyota just recently announced solid state batteries, right? That we're going to be putting those in, which will solve a lot of these range anxiety issues, rapid turnaround and charging. And that will really kind of solve some of those issues that, this crazy absorption of raw materials into batteries that only get used 10% of that impact.
Not to mention the panel before the F1 panel was about the metals market and geopolitics and what 90% of all lithium is mined in China. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
So even the national security impacts is pretty real.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it will change as the national security issues evolve more and more here. It's going to cause things like ocean bottom mining for lithium, which will cause all kinds of other issues. And and here in the United States, we have lithium, but it'll take 10 years to get a permit. It'll take another 10 years to get the mining where it's peaked out, you know, and so it's a long-term adventure.
Well, that's a pretty intense start to a panel, by the way, but I was just thinking about all those years you were in that role and how strong a position you had to take. So, Jenelle, maybe we could start with you around, when you think about manufacturing, and obviously it's sort of cradle to cradle at Trane, if you think about the upstream and materials, and which is clearly the majority of this audience, what do you see changing in manufacturing, and what do you think the implications are going to be for these guys?
Yeah. Oh, pardon me. Yes, I think there's a couple things. Policy and regulations is definitely changing. So as an OEM, an equipment manufacturer, we're seeing a lot more mandates related to EPR, so extended producer responsibility. What do we have to do for our products that we're putting out to market? How do we think about that entire life cycle, right? As Peter just mentioned. What are we doing upstream? How are we buying our products to ensure that we have higher recycled inputs for our metals, our steel, our aluminum, our copper? How are we packaging our goods to ensure that we're addressing those kind of overhaul changes that packaging expectations of us as a manufacturer as well? And then downstream, how are we recovering our products at end of life? So these are changing policies that we're seeing quite a bit come up. I think a couple other things that are changing too. There's a lot more appetite for this amongst our customers. So we hear a lot about Scope 3 reductions. How can we as a manufacturer help enable our partners and our customers to decarbonize as well? And so we have to think about those long-term effects, right? We put out product and chillers that last in the environment for 20, 30, 40, upwards of years. And what that means is what we're designing now won't actually have any type of, it has immediate implications, obviously, to our business, but then long-term type of, play and expectations on how we look at the entire life cycle of these products. And then finally, I'd say also, we have a big change in dichotomy of our expectations internally, which is great. We're starting to see a lot more of those key stakeholders, i.e. our supply chain procurement teams, our engineering orgs, think about these things when it comes to sustainability and circularity, not just relying on the corporate teams like myself to enable those, but actually utilizing their own embedded day-to-day operations to activate those things. So one thing that we did last year, which was great, we just enabled 2 new KPIs, key performance indicators, as our business. So Trane Technologies has had a presence in the sustainability space for quite some time. Back in 2019, we set quite ambitious sustainability targets to measure ourselves against by 2030. And at that time, we set a design systems for circularity goal. But in 2019, we didn't really know what that meant, to be totally frank, right? There weren't a lot of standards related to circularity. There weren't a lot of capabilities when it came to the market. Fast forward 5 years, we now know what that roadmap looks like to build success and how we will effectively achieve that. And so our 2 KPIs measure both material inflows, what are we buying in the market, and that KPI is how do we double our circular materials by 2030 against a 2019 baseline. And how we measure that is through engagements with the recycling industry, right? How do we increase our scrap inputs and recycled materials, renewables? How do we ensure that we're reusing components and products, remanufacturing components and products, things like that? And then downstream, kind of the material outflows measures our revenue, which I think is a really ambitious target, something that most manufacturers haven't yet been, let's say, ambitious or excited enough to talk about finances in a way to measure that with circularity performance. And so our revenue target is 10% of our total global revenue by 2030 will become from circular materials and circular products and circular services as well. And so we're really enabling that kind of entire perspective and life cycle change within our business. And that's what's changing with our company as well as our partners as well these days.
I love the comment that in 2019, your CEO set these wildly ambitious targets, and 5 years later, we know what they mean.
Yes, exactly.
Anyone familiar with this pattern, by the way? But actually, Trane, I would argue that Trane are a real leader in the sustainability and circularity space. So,
I started here 2 years ago, and I don't take credit for a lot of what we've done, truthfully. Over a 24-month period, you can't do that much. But if I think about the history of some of our circularity and sustainability endeavors and activities, they've surpassed 20 to 50 years. We've been doing remanufacturing for 50 years. We've been doing overhauls and maintenance in what we call our renewal business, where we're servicing our equipment and extending the life of our equipment for more than 20 years. So these types of operational businesses have enabled a lot of success within Trane. It's never been perceived as a circular opportunity, and that's where I think the change and evolution will come in the near future. Seeing that value through kind of a sustainability and circularity lens is really necessary.
We'll come back to that.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my career, there are a lot of them, but one of the biggest one was when we began as Toyota setting these 5-year targets, the 2025, then the 2030, then the 2050, we did not spend enough time talking to people like you. That was one of the mistakes that, you know, as I began the process of these grand targets, and then you turn around, well, how are we going to get this done? And we should have been having roundtables right here with this group, trying to get your input into what that meant. Because then we asked you to meet our targets without having had any input from you. Bad mistake. Bad mistake. Not too late to fix. Not too late to fix.
Someone else's problem though now, right? Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm still in this business, but yes,
I'm kidding.
I want to solve that problem. That's what I'm bringing. I want to help solve those issues and get the right people in the room where those collaborations can take place. And you know, the science behind the materials is still nebulous at best. And getting the right labs, the right cost for labs, and getting all those things put together that will allow us to work with our procurement officers, but even better, getting all the way back to the chief engineer who has those specs on the drawings. Once you get them on the drawings, boys and girls, it's done, right? So that's where we need to get this business in too, and therefore the economies of scale will change dramatically of how we get that done. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's why I think, you know, I was excited, you know, all these awards out here, and I realized that I didn't come properly dressed. I needed a pinstripe suit and a nice hat.
This could be arranged. We've got 65 minutes.
Got 65. Yeah. And I was talking over here, I didn't realize, maybe I shouldn't even had socks on. I didn't know that was a thing, so I'll get there.
So, firstly, I appreciate you acknowledging that the importance of partnership and also as early in the value chain as possible.
Yeah.
If you were leading a recycling business and you're on the material provision side, how would you go about building that with Toyota? How would you go about being even invited to a roundtable that you were on, or whomever your sort of successor is? Like,
that's a very, very great question.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times, I can't tell you how many, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Jenelle, all the phone calls that come in, right, and the cold calls and all that stuff, we don't pay that enough mind because we have our day-to-day issues. So people do that, and then they get frustrated, right? So I recommend 2 other ways in which to join or to get invited, and that is, you know, this is a great association. There's another group out there that I chaired for 6 years. It's called Suppliers Partnership for the Environment. And the Suppliers Partnership for the Environment is a group of OEMs and Tier 1, Tier 2 suppliers. Meet on a quarterly basis, all off-the-record discussion, and we have a lot of people and a lot of discussion that gets made. And we actually have a group in there. I'm now their executive advisor. I'm not pushing them. There are plenty of other ways. But what I'm saying is that is an open forum to get in. And then you begin that discussion. So I recommend that as one way in. The other is telling your story, you know, curating it and telling it in the right way. Sometimes we don't get the best story or the best, it's not putting your product in the best light. So we need to, you know, if you can work on some of that, some of you are great, but we gotta get the best story that attracts the attention to be able to make that happen. Finally, then we need to get you in front of procurement, right? We don't do anything without procurement. So that's the next hard hurdle. So I think that's how we can do it. And suppliers partnership for the environment, we have our procurement people that go to that too. So there's another way to get in contact.
If I could just add to that a little bit in regards to how to do things different in procurement especially, I think what's necessary, and I'm not sure if there's any organization who does this really, really well, but the future state should be that procurement decisions are made in conjunction with cost and carbon impact, right? And the capabilities of the recycling market for end-of-life scrap kind of access. And I think kind of sharing a collaborative output together with OEMs as well as recycling partners is necessary. And when I say that, what I mean is kind of an expectation to jointly develop something together, right? So if we are more transparent with what our demands are, what types of sourcing expectations we have, what alloys we need, we're more able to give that information to you guys. Hopefully the shared business model would look like you'd be investing in the capabilities and the growth at your facilities to be able to enable that for us. And I'll give an example. There's talking about another kind of affiliation or cohort, we engage quite a bit with the WBCSC, the World Business Coalition on Sustainable Development. They have different channels and working groups, and one of those is the Critical Materials Collective, CMC. We've been members for quite some time, and the past year and a half, we've been really engaging with other OEMs. So there's Apple's involved, ABB, Volvo, sorry about this, and some other kind of big operational manufacturers, right? And recyclers. So SA Recycling was on the stage here earlier today. Levitated Materials is part of this kind of cohort. And what we're trying to do is figure out, as a manufacturer, what do we need? What's our demand? As a recycler, what are your capabilities, or where are those gaps and opportunities to enable more growth and ultimately provide opportunities for us to diversify our suppliers, diversify in-region capabilities, to ensure that we have the partners that give us the materials that we need. And so this effort in particular is working to invest in LIBS technology to get the alloy grade aluminums that we expect and that we aren't able to source right now today locally or in region, and develop a kind of a collaborative working model that engages all the kind of parties to build out those capacities. We haven't figured out the silver bullet and the final output just quite yet. It's still a working model, but I will just say I think it's really a unique place in which we've been able to bring different stakeholders along this journey together, and we hear the voices of all, right? So it's not just us dictating, it's us saying what ultimately we would like to receive out of scrapped aluminum materials, and then ultimately what the recycling industry's capabilities to do that are, and where are those gaps that we need to fill in order to enable future growth and more scaled returns.
Yeah. When, Kevin, you said we've got to get in front of procurement, I think a lot of people got shivers in their spine. Everyone's a little bit afraid of procurement. And so I have sort of a two-part question for both of you. One, what criteria do you primarily look for in a partner in order to be at that round table or do that co-creation, Jenelle, that you talked about? And then two, how do we approach procurement, quote unquote, not in an adversarial way, knowing that they can, on occasion, be a little adversarial themselves? Like, what criteria are you looking for in a partner? And then specifically, when it comes to that procurement conversation, how do you tell that story, position your value, co-create and interact? And so I'll start with you, and then maybe Jenelle, you can go second.
Yeah, I think procurement's always looking, let's be straight up, I'm always straight shooter. Cost,
Yeah.
quality, and delivery on time. Those are the three magic things that get them excited. But what we're seeing is content and carbon reduction. Those are also now being part of that criteria. And to me, it's amazing in a fairly short period of time, even under the current administration, how carbon is still a major issue, right? Water is also, consumption is also big. So I go back to, can you meet the first three? that's expected. How do you enhance your story with all these other things that we're asking for? And to me, one of the best things pitch I ever heard was a young lady that came in and she said, I'm going to meet all the requirements you have, but let me tell you what makes me better. And she went into, you've got all these other targets. She went in and clearly made that story. I'm a given. I can do the first three. Let me tell you why we're better. And it was a very powerful story. And procurement happened to have the right people in the room, and it was all of a sudden we had a marriage made in heaven. So those are some of the big issues that need to get settled.
Outside of cost, quality, reliability, and sustainability chops, anything you want to add to that?
That's exactly what I would have said too, honestly. But I guess I'll say that when it comes to procurement, I liked what you said in relation to kind of the storytelling, right? I think that's really a missed piece of this whole thing, to be honest. I talk a lot with our procurement leader about what you're doing is enabling supply chain resiliency. Do you talk about that? Do you enable and discuss how building out, secondary scrap recovery or secondary cathode, utilization across our copper space, as an example, will possibly cut costs or enable kind of resiliency when it comes to all this? And I think the simple answer is no, because they work in this very close range of what they're expected to do is deliver effective, materials at cost on time, right? And so they don't think at the outside of the box type of picture. But I think roles like Kevin and myself, within large organizations, when we help to tell that story and communicate it within a different perspective of value, I think that was really ultimately what they're missing. And perhaps also where this, you all in the room can play a piece too. How can you help enable our 2030, 2050 targets? And how can we better, co-create those solutions together, I think is really important. We have a long way to go when it comes to procurement, though, to be totally frank. I think for us, some ways that we've enabled some success is they now have a seat at the table when we are developing our own long-term strategies in sustainability and carbon reduction. And when I say that, we're working together instead of telling them what we want them to do. And so it's a shared model to say, okay, within the copper, within aluminum space, what are your needs and demands, and what are our needs and demands? Where are those kind of overlays and similar opportunities? And we work together, kind of build out that roadmap and that strategy and that sourcing strategy as well, long term with them.
Can I add one other thing? Data.
That's my question.
Data is, I started my career out as a research scientist, and data in my head is the soul, the truth, right? Although those statistics can make things look what you want, I get it.
93% of all statistics are made up.
There you go. So, but the data, that's another piece that might help, right? If you came in and said, look, here is our footprint up front. This is what the content is. This is what we have been able to reduce in concerns, the amount of carbon we've been able to reduce, and have that data that's verifiable. That's another huge step to have right up front. So I recommend that strongly. I realize there's not enough certifications out there and universal worldly standards that we have yet. But I think that's something also that we could work together on. It's the royal we. I'm not Toyota anymore, just make that clear. It's the royal we. But I think that is a clear step that needs to happen and happen quickly.
Do you want to weigh in on the data?
Yeah, definitely a very important thing. We aren't able to identify our overall carbon, impact as a business without partners like you to enable those inputs, and the accurate, transparent, reliable inputs is really, 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 really key. I can't put more reallys after that to really kind of set it up. I think also what's really important when it comes to data is to think about how do we report this in a timely way. So I'll give an example. When our manufacturing plants work with our recyclers, scrap recovery recyclers, we generate a lot of scrap, unfortunately, through our operations. We have a 6-month delay in reporting that information. And so what that hinders is our ability to actually use that information to make significant changes in the immediate point in time. It also hinders us from utilizing that information to do reporting. We, both our companies or previous companies, right, report sustainability data on an annual basis. But the unfortunate part is with this lag, we either are making assumptions or we have gaps and we're not using that information to report out the great work that you all are doing to help enable our closed loop system. So for an example, last year we implemented closed loop scrap recovery at all of our North America plants. And what that means is we're generating our aluminum, steel, and copper scrap. We are directing that with recycling partners back to our tier 1 suppliers. So we're rebuying that scrap upstream. It was a huge endeavor to get that enabled, but the data is still lagging. So contractually we're doing it and we're implementing this, but we don't have necessarily the results to show that value just quite yet. And I hope to one day to be able to do that live and have that information there once it's been taken off the yard.
One of my clients manufactures about 70% of all aircraft fuselage. And obviously they're 30-year platforms once you've got those kind of positions. But yesterday we heard a lot about sort of onshoring and post-globalization trends, obviously for national security being part of that. But one of the things they're experiencing is like Boeing and even Airbus in Europe actually taking on way more responsibility themselves in their own teams than they would have previously as a manufacturer, meaning they are no longer looking to outsource everything to a third party and a supplier. They want to have the expertise, they want to have the IP, they want to have the talent. Is Trane doing similar things with Toyota? And I know you've got other clients these days. Are you seeing a similar trend, or is that a bit of an outlier?
Go ahead.
I think it is a trend.
Yeah.
The expertise, I say that, it is a trend for the larger companies, right? Some of the smaller companies don't have the resources to get expertise in-house all the time. But for what I'm seeing in the larger companies, yes. For example, when I worked at Toyota, our expertise continued to grow to be able to make those decisions based on the knowledge that we possessed.
Yep.
Right? But we were always willing to share that knowledge. So we weren't keeping it that tight. So I think it is a trend of being able to validate.
I actually have a client that makes bras and underwear. And they got to a point about 5 years ago and worked out there's not a single person that works there that knows how to make one. Like legit, they had to go to all their retired designers, and they built this anthropological library of interviews and videos and stitching, and because there was literally no one left in the place that could kind of do the work. And I know for a fact that when Nike were getting into a more data-driven, one-to-one marketing play, they worked out that they couldn't outsource that to agencies. And whilst they made some mistakes in narrowing their distribution, that no one's better at customer data than they are, and they built all that in-house. And so it's certainly, I think it's a trend too, but I don't know, Jenelle, do you have a similar point of view?
No, similar commentary for sure. I mean, I think we're ensuring that we are aware of each of the responsibilities and expectations across the supply chain. And what that means is different for each business team. So for me, within the sustainability corporate org, it's my expectation to understand what those levers to embed change might be and how to support those business groups like procurement or other who could work directly with the supply chain partners to do that. So definitely seeing that transition as well.
Do you have an expectation of your partners? Oh, we got a question. Go for it, sir. Yeah, it's on.
You mentioned, and I'm sorry, for the former Toyota, you were talking about the relationship of the recycler that you guys have partnered with to take your scrap away. And for years in our industry, it's always kind of been, that was the last thing thought of by the manufacturer. It was kind of just handed to somebody to, hey, handle this and take care of, and they reached out to us. And so it's great to hear, and I wanted to know if it's something that's growing in your industry and more manufacturing wanted to do this, where it's becoming more of a critical idea. Because to us, it was always, as long as we got the stuff out of your facility as quickly as possible, that's all that mattered. But to hear you talk about, well, you also now want the information back as quickly as possible. And that is new for us in the sense of us collecting that data to get it to you. And in essence, so 2 questions. Are you seeing that as a trend as manufacturers wanting more than just quick service? They want other information. And what other information are these manufacturers looking for? And I wish there was more people in here for you guys to hear about this, but thank you for your time.
Yeah, I mean, in short, the answer is yes. But I also think it depends on what manufacturers you're talking to, right? We have 2 representative manufacturers here on the table who have some very far-reaching sustainability goals. I think it's not the norm to necessarily be working with those types of manufacturers, maybe at scale, right? Large companies do typically have some type of performance expectations for their businesses to meet these targets and trends that Kevin and I are talking about. When it comes to data, back to what is the total weight of material that you're taking off of our facilities? What is that perhaps carbon alternative, right, comparison if we were not to do that? And when I think not to do that, the way that we're measuring our closed loop work, the example I just gave, was that material is going to be recycled, right? But it's going to be downcycled in many cases, right? So for the HVAC space, we need very unique alloys for many of our applications, especially on the aluminum side, to ensure that we have heat transfer gains, we have corrosion mitigation, things like that. The impurity levels are at a certain standard. I'm sure in the car industry, something is similar to that. And so what that means, though, is when that material is taken off our site, if it's not reprocessed back to our supply chain partners that we rebuy from, it's being downvalued, right? And so we want to ensure that doesn't happen long term, and that's why we are getting engaged. I'm not sure if that's the norm, and maybe Kevin has a thought on that. I would probably, it'd be safe to say that's probably not the norm, but I hope long term it becomes a transition as more companies like ours start to do this. And I'll be totally honest, we've also financially benefited quite significantly from this type of work. So I think once more companies understand that, there is financial return and value in kind of creating this ecosystem, hopefully they'll jump on board as well.
Yeah, I'll support that. I think it is a trend. I think the more closed loop that we have, the more knowledge that we have with the data that way too, right? So it's more continuity, it's more quality of the same materials and things of that nature. So I think that's an important trend. And you brought up a great point, cost and benefits to that. In the company that I've worked for, we were able to take environmental sustainability and turn it into a profit center. It was hard for my company to understand that, of actually receiving a check. It took 6 months for them to figure out how to receive a check in this space.
It's true.
It was really kind of comical, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
So that is possible. And when you saw the economic analysis this morning of where we're at, one of the startling things up there, it shouldn't have been startling, is electricity costs going up 41%. That's nothing new. You look at a chart for electric costs, it's like this. It may have a dip here and a spike there, but that's the angle. It's always been that way. So we need to think about, and I don't want to digress here, but China's being brilliant right now. They have the most renewable energy of any other country. They're putting up solar panels everywhere, right? And they are generating a lot more renewable energy. I don't know where, we're going to have to catch on sooner or later to be able to figure this out, to be able to reduce that demand. Now, everybody talks about cost, and I can tell you that virtual power purchase agreements, PPAs, all those things, there are ways to make money in that, and we did. So I'm just saying those are part of this process, that we need to look at the economic benefits. We need to look at how we do the closed loop systems. How do we work with you, collaborate with you to be able to make those things easier and faster?
The quality of the B2B partnership really matters and is evolving, and expectations are growing, not just around data, but around co-creation, et cetera. There was a fairly large piece of research done by a group that's now owned by Gartner on what drives loyalty in a B2B partnership. And the price to value ratio was only 17%. In terms of, it was an empirical study, and it was actually much more about how well did your partners help you identify opportunities that you didn't know were available. Did they help you to see around corners? One of the most interesting findings was, have you networked into my organization, not just into me as a buyer or procurement? Like, you've got support throughout the manufacturing process as well, right? What are some of the things that you would be looking for today that would define a really good partner? Like, if you were to sort of list 4 or 5 criteria that would be differentiated, what would you say? Maybe you go first.
First thing is, I like to be questioned. I'd like for people to come back and say, nope, I don't agree with that. Even though you are my partner and I'm paying your bills, is how do you continuously exchange ideas? That's part of the culture, right? How do you get that communication that allows you? I always likened it to, you got in a fight, but you went home and had a beer together, right? That's what that looks like to me, and that competition of how do we improve quality as a partnership together. Because when you can do that and they teach you things, you become invaluable. You become ingrained in that ability to create better product. And when somebody came to me and said, this is a great example, back when I was running paint shops across North America, the guy looked at me and he said, are you worried about the problem that you're faced today, or you want us to fix this for 5 years and on? And, as a production guy at that time, I was worried about getting that next car off that line that didn't have a defect. But when we sit back and he asked me that question, I said, stop, you're right. Let's look at this long term and let's make this better. Let's save costs doing that. That to me is a great partnership. Somebody can, as you said, actually look around the corner and challenge you.
Love it. Jenelle?
I'd say a couple things that maybe I've already mentioned a bit today. One is innovation. I think a great partnership requires co-collaboration and great innovation. So I mentioned kind of the WBCSD, Critical Materials Collective, that we're working on. It requires us to invest our time and resources to ensure success, but it also requires kind of partners like yourselves to do the same. And so being willing to innovate, being willing to invest in technologies, I think is really key to assure for our purposes as a manufacturer, we trust the capabilities that do exist and that we can rely on something that's new. There's a lot of times in which, and I'm sure Kevin has been there too, where we have to convince a stakeholder internally that something new is not bad, right? So something new can be just as good, if not better. I think it just requires that kind of co-working together to figure that out. So that's one thing. And then also the expectation, at least from my perspective, is like long-term success partnership, right? This is not a one and done type of thing that we look to enable within Trane Technologies. We really look to enable partners that will give us long-term strategic imperatives and growth in whatever that activity might be. So I'll give another example because you love those, Peter. But one thing that we're doing right now is is we are looking to recover our large chillers at end of life from our customer sites. Those chillers could be as large as this stage that we're standing on today or sitting on today. And it requires a lot of logistics and partners to make that happen. And so what we're doing is we're working with a couple key recycling partners across the states and looking to figure out how do we recover and disassemble those core components that I mentioned earlier that we want to remanufacture. How do we work with different partners to recycle the rare earth elements and whatnot in more effective ways, and how to create value on both sides of the table to make this economy of scale that actually works collectively. We haven't engaged, Trane Technologies has not engaged at scale in this type of end-of-life recovery to date. We do buy customers' equipment and refurb them or repair them in a way that we can get them back into our rental fleet. But this is a totally different and new endeavor for us, and we're really excited about it. And I think that partnership, again, what creates a good value of partner, innovation, and kind of long-term successful planning will enable that, hopefully.
One of the things I've seen emerging lately is going from not just sort of co-creating and co-investing in innovation, but getting into actually a more vested level of partnership. So for instance, sharing in cost savings and having performance-based contracts. So like, I know Microsoft changed their primary real estate partner for all of their offices, and they made it like 10 times more money than the guys that had it before, but it cost Microsoft less money than it cost them before because they were just sharing in efficiencies that were created. I know in the consulting business, McKinsey have pioneered a new model where, actually BCG did it too with digital ventures, where they would start companies with their clients and that their success became each other's success. Are you seeing any of that? Are you doing those sorts of things already in terms of like really having the truly aligned incentives between you and your partners, or is that probably still something further out?
Toyota has a number of those ventures.
Yeah.
If you look at some of our manufacturing plants, we have suppliers on our site.
Yeah.
Coexisting right there. Sometimes in the bays are connected, and so yes, that's a good way of doing that, because you're all vested in trying to get the same thing done, right? And you coexist underneath the same roof or on the same property. So I think that is a trend, even if it's not on the same property, but underneath the same management, if you will.
Yeah.
I think for Trane Technologies, we are co-investing in companies that can help enable our future ambitions. And so when I say that, data center space is obviously a huge space for our business growth. AI, I can't be on a panel without saying those two letters.
We almost made it 45 minutes without.
I know, I apologize. So AI growth is obviously a big part of that business future. We have, kind of separate from the recycling space, but I'll just mention it because you asked the question, we have some significant growth projections related to our digital space. And so we've seen a lot of different companies come to the table and enable digital AI solutions for our buildings that we have heating and cooling systems in. And we've ultimately partnered with them, kind of helped them scale and grow, and then eventually acquired those businesses as well.
Yeah.
So we've seen that quite a bit.
I know we mentioned this when we met prior. I know one of your competitors pretty well, and when they started building out their preventative maintenance digital platforms, both on the HVAC side and at that time in the elevator business as well, they worked out that they could reduce truck rolls by like 80%, particularly in the elevator space, right? And when they actually modeled that out, that was a really bad idea for them in terms of lost revenue and lost urgent higher fees for urgent call-outs and things like that. But they eventually got to a space where they would share the savings with the clients as well. And I think I personally think we'll see more of those models. In my experience, companies that do partnership well have a set of rituals that really elevate the right things within that partnership, right? So it's one thing to say, let's co-create or let's co-invest. It's another thing to have them embedded in your quarterly planning process or your LRP process every 24 months or however often you do it. What are some of the rituals that you've seen either that you have utilized or that you've seen other companies do or you wish you had done that if you had those rituals as part of your partnerships, they would have been even more strategic, more valuable?
Well, we had annual business planning meetings with all our suppliers,
Yeah.
right? That one, it was kind of like this. You gathered up, you had a great time, you had adult beverages of your choice, or soda, water.
These guys don't go out.
I myself, I won't even lie.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, anyway.
That's a rabbit hole.
That's a whole nother
You're
subject.
from Kentucky, right?
Yeah, I am from Kentucky, if that gives you a clue what they might serve there. So, but yeah, those are the important, I agree, that's 100% of the process. Again, as I said in the very beginning, more conversation should have been had here between my team and the recyclers, ReMA. And so those business meetings happen 2, 3, 4 times a year that need to be a part of that planning cycle. And that's where that partnership also becomes integrated. So it has to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have similar meetings. It's actually happening next week with all of our suppliers in North Carolina. That's where our headquarters is in Davidson. And at that time, a lot of our tier 1 metal suppliers are there. I think there might be maybe an opportunity here. I'll respond to that instead of your question a little bit, Peter, but I'm going to guess that our recycling partners are perhaps not as involved in those meetings and in those discussions, and that is an opportunity for sure. And we talked a little bit about procurement earlier. I think it's just a matter of giving them more awareness as to your capabilities, the opportunities in which we can scale together. And eventually, maybe next year, 12 months from now, you will have a seat at that table and we'll be present and more able to kind of embed change within our procurement teams and our supply strategies. So long-term thinking, that's the goal there.
You made a point earlier, Jenelle, and two of them actually I want to come back to. The first one was around, you're kind of describing the breakdown process, but also the reuse process. And it made me wonder whether you're increasingly looking for partners that can do more than one thing. Like, are you seeing, I don't want to lead the witness, are you seeing a desire for more integrated, more comprehensive partners in terms of what they can do in the value chain, or is it best in class, most reliable? Like,
makes it easier when you only have to go to one person versus many, right? Yeah. So yes, I think ideally, if a partner can scrap, disassemble, also possibly be the smelter or whatnot, right, at one facility, you just have, again, gaining that kind of trust and that kind of long-term engagement with that stakeholder could be valuable. I don't see that very frequently, but I could see value in that.
I think if I can add to that, it's also the responsibility of the OEMs to design their product to help make your life simpler.
Yeah.
That communication, that collaboration needs to take place. And one of the things that Toyota had done for years was, figuring out how you can take the wiring harness out with one tug, right? And so they're designing vehicles like that and products like that that help make that simpler, which makes it less complicated, more safe to be able to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
If I could just add real quickly to that, I think that's really key, and we haven't really brought design up in this conversation. The gentleman who asked the question earlier, I meant to respond to that. You can only manage what you get, and what we give you through our manufacturing production cycles, right, is unfortunately what you have to work with. That's not fair, right? I would say that's not fair for the recycling industry. So it's our responsibility as a manufacturer to think across upstream and downstream cycles to enable redesign. So, we have a tool that we utilize through new product development called the DFSC module, so Design for Sustainability Circularity module. And basically what that means is our engineers, our product management teams, and anybody else who's designing any type of new product works through early phase expectations on what are we sourcing to put into that product, how are we manufacturing that good to be more, energy efficient, how are our customers utilizing those systems to enable, lower carbon outputs, and then ultimately downstream, how are we designing to be disassembled, to be remanufacturable, to be recoverable, to be recyclable, right? We're starting to see the trends that we will eventually enable end-of-life recovery ease for partners like you all. And I think in a handful of years, hopefully you'll start seeing that too once you get, our systems at your yards. But there's a long way to go too, for sure, to enable success there.
The second thing I wanted to come back to, and we talked about this in the keynote yesterday, just before I ask the question, there are two mics up, and so I'm going to hand over to you for questions for our panelists here after this one. But I talked about this kind of trend where we hire a chief digital officer and everyone goes and does their job and says, let me know when we're digitized, or a chief sustainability officer and everyone just goes back to doing things the way they do it, and they're like, let me know when we're sustainable, right? This kind of isolated, high accountability, little authority kind of dynamic, right? And you made the comment, Jenelle, about that it wasn't just procurement owning these things, it was all the way down to the production teams, and obviously that represents culture change and large-scale behavior change, really, around how people make decisions, what they prioritize in a design phase, whether they're even thinking of end of life, things like that. And so what have you seen, and I'd like it through the lens of partnership, what have you seen from partners in their ability to help you enable larger change within Trane or within Toyota or other examples? Because, it's all good and well to have these ambitions, like our 2030 goals. It's a whole other thing to change a large consolidated conglomerate like Trane or a Japanese heritage company like TMNA, or, these are really hard cultures to shift. How have partners helped you in your transformation journeys? That's a tough question, by the way. Janelle's like, you go first.
Yeah. I think that Toyota is historically known for long-term relationships. Yep. Our partners have been lifetime partners. There are ways that communication has come over the years that has garnered better product, safer product, higher efficiencies in manufacturing. So to me, that's kind of the key to the long-term success. And it should be known, if you don't know it, Toyota doesn't make a decision on the spot. It is sometimes extremely painful, long, arduous, short-term, long-term, medium-term. What does this all mean? But as you can see, sometimes it's very successful.
Yeah. I mean, it's been great for quality. I could cite an example or two where innovation was thwarted by that, but that's kind of the trade-off, right?
Make no mistake, innovation is often stymied by those who can't make a decision or are scared of a potential downfall.
Yeah.
So that's also another issue to that. So.
Jenelle, any thoughts from you?
I think for partnerships, we too have long-standing partners that enable the functionality of our chillers. I mean, we think about the heart of our chiller is a compressor. We manufacture some of those compressors, but we rely on suppliers to manufacture, many of our compressors that we put out and our chillers we put out to market. And so what that means is that we have to have that trust and that partnership to ensure long-term strategic growth together, or enable those together, and that our goals are aligned. I think that's really important. Some of the key partners that I work with on kind of innovation have similar sustainability targets as us. And so I think that helps to kind of figure out the message, figure out the solution, figure out the value together, and build a better mousetrap long-term, collaboratively that can, stand the test of time.
Awesome. Questions from the crowd? Yep.
Can I add a comment here before we get to that? Sorry. And I didn't see anybody sprinting to a microphone yet. So
someone will break the ice for us. We'll just all sit here silently uncomfortable.
Strategically, you should think about, to answer that question too, you should think about how many of you actually sit or have somebody sit in the boardroom discussing sustainability on a consistent basis. Is it a part of the business decision-making process? Is it a part of the design process? Is it a part of the specifications in procurement and engineering? That is a key also to becoming a good partner in creating innovation that is embedded in business decision-making process. Cost savings. You know, we talked earlier, anytime somebody says environmental sustainability, oh dear God, it's gonna cost me something. It doesn't have to do that, because you can build it into your sustainability strategy and talk about it and work yourself through that, and that's where it's gonna happen. I encourage that. And if you don't know how to get started in that, find out how to get started in that. That is a critical step, in my opinion, of that long-term ability to serve each other.
If I could just add to that too, I love that. And Trane leads with sustainability. That is part of our mission, and that's part of our value proposition as a company. We don't take that as kind of a offshoot of what we do. We are a sustainable innovator, and that's how we see ourselves, and that's how our CEO represents ourselves in the market. Every single person within our company is expected to have a sustainability goal on an annual basis. If you're a leader at a certain level and above, you also have AIM targets. So your annual bonus will be representative based on performance metrics that are met or not met as an organization. That's how you really start to change businesses. And so that's how, as Kevin mentioned, some ideas, get started with that. You talk about safety probably at the start of every single meeting, at every single table. Can you talk about sustainability in the same way? And start to really change that model within a company to enable that success long term.
Did we get anyone running to the mic? Yeah. if you just, over here. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. So the question is for the gentleman from Toyota. I heard a lot of good things in this conversation, closed loop feedback systems and such. A lot of the Toyota, I guess the stampings are done at tier 1s, tier 2s, and so there's most likely a lot of leakage, right? It's not necessarily closed loop. Is Toyota doing anything directly with tier 1s and tier 2s where you envision a system where a lot of that material is coming back to the rolling mills or wherever the starting point?
I can't speak for Toyota directly right now, but what I can say is yes.
Okay.
That was definitive.
Anyone else?
I got one. Yeah, we on the first we did a panel for the metals businesses yesterday, and we talked a lot about disruption globally in the geopolitical environments, and obviously, kinetic warfare, and not just Iran, but potentially China, Taiwan, etc. What are you seeing on it? Like, we started kind of what's changing, and we've been really heavy on the sustainability piece, really heavy on the partnership piece. What are the other big trends that you're seeing? What are the other big disruptive forces that are changing the way manufacturers approach manufacturing and approach their partnerships as well?
I mean, I'll speak regarding the stance that I take when it comes to tariffs and how I engage with our supply chain procurement teams is in relation to, could we therefore lean in on increasing our investment and our buy volumes related to scrap? The response I get back from them in many cases is we don't have in-region local scrap that we can utilize, and that's again back to the how do we engage with you all in the room to figure that model out and redesign alloys in a way that we can utilize. But yeah, from my perspective, at least on the tariff side, I more so lean in if there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to what we are buying outside of the States and bringing in, let's lean in on the fact that if there's sourcing capabilities here locally, let's do more of that. And so our teams are definitely starting to trend towards that too, for more resiliency and kind of expectations to balance the turmoil that's happening within the market.
I think one of the things that I'm seeing a lot from some of the clients that I'm working with now is it goes along with the economic report we got this morning. Let's not believe the rhetoric. Right? Let's not, and that's the advice that I've been giving is, would we stop reading headlines, right? Would we make decisions based on the facts that we know and not the trends that people think we're seeing? Because I'm amazed how much people believe the BS that they read in the morning headlines. Business is no different. Government affairs folks, all those guys, and the lawyers. Any lawyers in the room?
Any recovering lawyers in the room?
Anybody? All right, that's good. I really don't like to make anybody mad in a room. But
The tape's running, by the way. Just
that's okay. I've offended them before.
good.
We've got to get past all of that nonsense. We've got to bring back, and gosh, I'll get on my high horse. My father was a United Methodist minister, by the way, and every once in a while I get a little preachy. I apologize. But we got to get past the rhetoric of, the conflict side of this.
Yeah.
And we got to get back into, let's manufacture based on solid principles, solid facts, solid economic data that's out there, and stop starting the first part of every freaking board meeting with what's going on in the world. What is the trend? What do the headlines say? That's a bad trend. And I'm starting to advise and see a lot of people that are beginning to, push the lawyer over here, push the government affairs people over here, and let's talk about business. What makes us a better company? So to me, I think that's a solid trend that we need to continue to see more of.
Any other comments? Any other questions from the group? All right, I'm going to give us one last question to close. If you were to give, 1-2 pieces of advice to the recyclers in the room in terms of positioning their businesses to have deeper partnerships, more profitable partnerships defined by innovation and the sorts of things we've been talking about, what would your kind of closing thoughts and even asks of the group be?
Ladies before gentlemen.
I said a lot of this already, I guess, but I'll just reemphasize that let's work together in a more effective way to build out the future state of the recycling industry and recovery industry, right? Even if Trane is maybe an oddball in the sense of what we're asking or what we're wanting to do, I will say that I think we are on the progressive line of things, but people will follow. And so we are being proactive in enabling and assuring kind of our commitment, our strategy, our growth plans related to circularity, sustainability, et cetera. But we won't be the last. And so working to develop a solution together, I think will hopefully be something that can then be replicated long-term behind us.
Just before you go, I actually had a client in Canada about 10 years ago that was in the sort of logistics business, so to speak. We actually have a panel on logistics later. And they noticed that their clients were optimizing what are called lanes. And sort of the unit of analysis was a single lane, like Toronto to Montreal. And that the thing that their clients really needed to do was optimize at a full network and system level. And that maybe there were lanes that could be more inefficiently priced, but it contributed to better overall cost structures and things like that. And it sounds like the invitation is, don't just come and go, let's partner together. It's let's come with a point of view, come with questioning your answers, come with thought leadership and ideas and insights, not just the proverbial let's communicate and partner more. That's sort of what I think I'm hearing in the base of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Kevin mentioned it earlier. I'm okay to be wrong. I'm okay to be questioned. That's, I think, how I've been in reasonably successful roles in my career. I ask questions. Maybe I challenge the norm in a way that others may perhaps not do. But that doesn't mean that I'm always right, and doesn't mean our company's always right in what we're trying to achieve. We may propose something that is totally not something that is even feasible ever in your industry. So tell me that. I want to know that, right? I want to build something or build expectations internally that we can do something that's really not able, right? So kind of level playing with what really could perhaps make sense in the innovation side, investment side, and long-term growth side. I'm happy to hear that and happy to work to figure that out together.
It came up on the panel yesterday. Mark Twain had many famous quotes, one of which was, "It's not what you don't know that kills you, it's what you think you know that just ain't so." And so I like this idea of questioning assumptions. Bring us home, Kevin.
I think you guys have a lot of power out there. Without you guys, we'll never meet the targets that we're searching to get. Can't happen. It's up to you to work with us and us to work with you to make that happen. So my words of advice, if I could, as I would walk off this stage, is use that. Tell your story. Continue to engage. I heard earlier from, I think it was Robin, it said that 70-some% of cars are of recycled material. Take steel out of that number and tell me how much of that car is recycled content. It's going to be a completely different number. We need to begin working on that. Those other things, those other parts that we can continue to do. And we need to be able to do that and assure that we're going to have, surface quality that's great. We're going to have safety that's the same. Your customer satisfaction would be the same. All those things that we need to work on. And there's a lot of parts in an automobile that you never see that could be used. Underscoring the headliner, under panels, all those, and that stupid little thing that goes around your license plate, right? That's irritating when you have to change it. That doesn't have to be a perfect part. Doesn't have to be perfect plastic. So there's a lot of places we need to begin to work. And I think those are the parts that we need to have inroads. And I would continue to say that, work with somebody that can get you an in. And, I mentioned supplier partnership. There's committees in there working on circular economy, where you can put your input in and deal with. Find somebody like that to help you get that in and tell your story and be a part of that solution. I think that would be an incredible way to advance how fast we can get there.
Well, I think it's incredibly generous of the two of you to come here to Vegas and invest your time, obviously, in support of these partners. So maybe join me in thanking our two panelists today. It's a really nice job, guys. Thanks very much. And this is the first panel we finished on time. This is amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you at logistics later, hopefully.